When buying property, some choose to do so through auctions, and to sell through auctions, in fact, is the real choice. Roy Lazarus, CEO of Park Village Auctions, and Bradley Stevens, Property Director at Aucor, join us for more. Let's start with you, Roy, in Johannesburg. Bradley, of course, joining us from Cape Town. They say that an auction is the best way to get the true value of anything, because if everyone who knows about it is there bidding, you're going to find the right price. Is that true of the property sector in South Africa, and how much do we use auctions to sell property?
Morning to you. The best way of determining value is what someone's prepared to pay for a property at a well-advertised public auction. Now, there are two types of auctions, one with reserve, one without reserve. And it's the auctioneer's responsibility to let the public know that they're selling the property with reserve and without a reserve. If it's without reserve, the property is confirmed at the fall of the hammer. With the reserve, the auctioneer must disclose to the public that they're sold with the reserve, and when you reach the reserve, you now tell them that it's now open for sale and it's then knocked down to the highest bidder at the auction sale. Now, to answer your question, there's major advantages selling a property by public auction compared to the traditional way of selling a property. First of all, public auction brings the transaction to finality that much quicker. Everybody knows, as long as you do your homework, what time the auction is going to take place and where the auction is going to take place. So it's a place where all the buyers meet and a price is determined. Obviously, the buyer wants to pay the least amount and the seller wants to pay wants the most expensive amount for it. But the seller's obviously hoping that the buyer catches something that we regard in the trade as auction fever, and the buyer wants a bargain. And normally it's somewhere in between where the forces of demand and supply meet. I must point out, to you, on a public auction, there's no cooling off period. Whereas if you buy a house in the traditional way, there's a cooling off period. And by public auctions, the only time you can sell a property voetstoots. It's the way you see it, that's the way you get it.
What's a cooling off period?
That if you buy a property by the traditional means, you've got 5 days to say you don't want it or you do want it. At a public auction, there's no such opportunity. And in my opinion, the best advantage for a public auction is that there are no suspensive conditions. You can't make an offer saying, on the condition that I'm going to sell my property for 2 million rand or 3 million rand, or in case I get a bond or not. There is no suspensive conditions. So you make an offer, voetstoots the way it is, and you can't fall back on it. So what I'm saying is, before you make an offer on public auction, make sure you do your homework, you know what you're buying, you've got the money, you can get the finance, and you know exactly what you're buying. You know with the condition of the house, you know where you are, what you are, because there's no falling back. Otherwise, you're going to lose part of your deposit as a row crop. Very important.
Bradley, let's come to you in Cape Town. We've basically looked in the last minutes at the benefits of selling property on auction. What are some of the pitfalls that a potential buyer should particularly look out for, as well as somebody who's considering being a potential seller on the using an auction as a vehicle?
Morning to you guys. Let me just deal with the first aspect of your question in respect of buyers. Look, it is pertinent. Every single buyer needs to do their homework. They get given an extensive due diligence pack by our brokers and by our in-house team. Imperative that they understand the terms and conditions, as Roy pointed out. Imperative they know they have to pay a deposit and commission on the fall of the hammer. There is no coming back. If there are any material issues pertaining to the property, they would have been made aware of it by now. You know, there is a 4-week period from the time, or 4 to 5 week period from the time we get an instruction to the time we go to auction. In that time frame, the broker, the property marketer that's running on the property would have formed a relationship with the buyer, would have explained to them all the legalities pertaining to the auction, the terms and conditions, how to bid. If there are any material issues pertaining to the property, for example, there might be a right to first refusal with a tenant, you know, that would have been explained to them. So the process, we make the process a lot easier. We make, you know, the property marketer forms a relationship with the prospective purchasers, and, you know, to ease them into buying on auction. It's as simple as that. I think, you know, some of the, you know, from a buyer's perspective, one of the benefits of buying at auction, it provides you with real transparency. You see who you're bidding against, as against in the traditional method of brokering. You as a prospective purchaser, your offer is getting, you know, paraded around with multiple buyers. And it also gives you a true indication of where the market is. You're present, you're buying a property, you see what's happening, and you see what people are prepared to pay.
Yeah, interesting that talk about the transparency, Roy, in the market. Now, there have been some scandals, and people who have done auctioneering know about planting people in the audience, pushing up the price. Whether there is a reserve or not, it's possible for this to happen without anyone knowing it. How clean is the industry, and particularly in your field, in the property world?
Well, since the new Consumer Protection Act, it's very clean, because the condition of sale allows the auctioneer to bid against the public, and if he wants to, and it's disclosed. One of the conditional sales says that this is a reserve sale, and the auctioneer is going to bid up to the reserve price. The conditional sales say it as per the Consumer Protection Act.
But I'm thinking of that Wendy Applebaum case where there was a bidder in the audience and led to a huge scandal, and she refused to accept that there was a bid opposite. Was that the case?
That was before the Consumer
Protection?
Lack
of transparency.
That was before, and to be 100% honest, it's never really been tested. It's a very young act, but every auctioneer has a condition of sale which says that the auctioneer, if it's a reserve sale, says the auctioneer will be bidding up to the reserve price. So I don't believe that can ever happen again because of the new Consumer Protection Act, where the public are protected.
Let's look at property classes very quickly, Bradley, and perhaps you can just give us some insight into which properties tend to sell really quickly and are most popular for an auction in comparison to each other.
Okay, look, I'll break that up between commercial and residential. Look, you get many different kinds of commercial properties, but let me just, for ease of reference, just refer to it as commercial and residential for now. In the traditional, when you talk about residential property, we mainly take on residential stock to auction when there's an element of distress behind the sale. Other than that, it becomes a difficult asset class to sell. So residential properties are mainly centered around insolvencies, liquidations, deceased estates. And when it comes to commercial, it's been more of an accepted norm of selling in the industry right now. Many listed property funds use our mechanism to sell their stock, for ease of transparency. And when you put a commercial property with a high yield on auction, with strong tenants, long leases, strong covenants, very often you overshoot the mandate. No, well, not very often, but it can happen quite often. As I said, so when it comes to residential property, it is a little bit more tougher. There's always been that element of distress associated with residential property. However, that being said, when it comes to residential, you might find there are sellers that are immigrating, they need a quick sell, and as Roy pointed out, we offer a mechanism where a seller can get a clean cash offer within 3 to 4 weeks from the day they give us an instruction to go to auction.
Roy, last question for you.
That's the one value added we do offer.
Last question for you, Roy, is that we increasingly have online auctions.
Yes.
So what about the auction fever? It's colder, it's easier to do, but do you still get that excitement?
Most definitely. In fact, the whole auction business is changing. We offer online live auctions where you can bid from your home or from your office. It's by video streaming. You can go in and watch the auction. You can watch the auctioneer, so you do not have to be at the auction at that specific time or date.
But you still have the auctioneer doing the chance.
You watch everything. You hope that the buyers do catch auction fever and someone can bid from their home. In America, it's very big, this online live streaming, and it's starting to grow here with the more expensive properties. Most definitely it's taking off, where you don't have to go to the actual auction, and then sometimes people don't want to know who's bidding against them, so they will bid from their office. But obviously you take a deposit before someone can bid against legitimate bidders at an auction sale. There's always the excitement, particularly when we're selling motor cars and trucks, but in properties as well, the excitement's starting to resume.